Today, I'm going to be taking a look at superheroes and the impact they have had on our culture. Why do we connect to them so much? Why have these stories lasted all the way since 1938, almost a century of constant storytelling? What does it tell us about humanity and the stories we look for that we have found such passion and joy in these costume crusaders? In order to truly understand the answer to this, I feel we have to start at the beginning. We must start with Action Comics number 1 and the first appearance of Superman. The cover itself lays out, to me at least, the mission statement of what superheroes would be and what they continue to be, and taking a closer look at them reveals many answers to the questions I have presented. In 1938, a small publishing company called National Comics was looking for stories to put in their new anthology series. After the success of their previous series, focused on hard-hitting detective stories, they decided they wanted to start anew with an adventure action series. They had a bunch of stories that they were already sitting on that they knew they had to put out, and they all seemed to fit together nicely into this one anthology. However, they needed one big hook to draw people in. They needed a cover full of spectacle and action, and a story that would keep people reading next month. They found what they were looking for in a drawer full of old pictures. The cover depicted a man in a blue suit and red cape smashing a bright green car as onlookers looked in terror. This cover, which was reportedly called ridiculous and unrealistic by the publisher at the time, was chosen just because of the spectacle it would attract. National hurriedly contacted the original pitchers, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, to see if they could expand the story, which at the time was like a one-page comic strip, into a full 13-page comic to be the hook for this new anthology series. What seemed at the time as just another random comic book would go on to change the face of pop culture and the world forever. Action Comics number 1 had been released, and with it, Superman was born. There was now no going back. As Grant Morrison states in their book, Super Gods, the cover of this comic screams action. The title says it all, Action Comics number 1. The logo itself is in constant motion, with the action swooping across the page in diagonal letters. Now, the centerpiece of the entire cover is obviously Superman. At the time, an unnamed character that no one knew unless they opened the book to find out who it was. His feet are almost completely off the ground, like he's flying in constant motion and speed, and he just effortlessly destroys this bright, green, beautiful-looking car. At the time, cars were new. They were a symbol of American industry, of the pure strength that could happen with innovation and productivity. So, it's strange that this cover decides to destroy this car, this seemingly symbol of advancement and progress. But, as Grant Morrison argues in their book, Superman was something more. Superman was a savior of the people. The people who had been put out of work by factory lines, by big businesses coming and buying everything they owned. The car represented the symbol of the ever-encroaching industry that was putting people out of work and causing things like the Great Depression. Rather than Superman supporting the machine, he destroys it. He's an everyman socialist, come to save us from the threats that are too big for us humans to fight against for ourselves. Superman is clearly stronger than us, as this cover shows. He destroys the car effortlessly, and is basically jumping into the air as he does it. He has come down to save the little man. He has come down to do what we could not do on our own. Going further, this cover starts at the climax of the story. Superman had already defeated the enemies, as we see as they run from the car screaming. They had kidnapped Lois Lane, who almost everyone now knows as Superman's wife, and he had chased after them and destroys their car. But the fact that this cover starts at the climax is important, because it tells us many things about who superheroes would become, and who they already were. They always win. The story starts at the climax because there isn't really any suspense about whether Superman would win. He's bigger than us, he's more powerful than us, so of course he's going to win. Why is that important? As stated, this cover starts at the climax. Superman had already won already. And this leads us to our first big answer for why we connect so much with these stories. And it's because they're about characters that win. It's about hope and happiness in the end. When you watch a superhero movie or read a comic, you often aren't worried about whether the heroes are going to come out at the end of the story alive or winning. You know they will, because they always do. And the comfort that we find in these stories has carried us across lifetimes. Stories about characters larger than life coming in and saving us and winning comfort us in times when we feel like there's nothing that can comfort us. We want to believe that if we fight strong enough and are good enough, we will win. And our heroes prove to us that issue after issue, year after year, they always win. We've escaped into these stories for so long because they represent an ideal world where we do win. And maybe that world is possible someday. This cover to me represents the mission statement of what superheroes have been for more or less the past 80 years. Larger than life characters fighting larger than life's problems and always finding a way to win. We want to win. Humans want to know that the problems that we think are too big can be handled. And superheroes remind us that, in some way, they can. The bomb changed everything. Power, which previously had only been seen in the myths of old, or the pages of far out science fiction, was now a reality for humans. At any given moment, at any second, with the simple push of a button, everything and everyone you knew and loved would be gone. How did we go about living in a world where the reality was more dangerous than our fiction? Where the bomb was an ever constant threat? Well, we make more heroes, of course. In 1961, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee would release the first issue of their new superhero comic, Fantastic Four. Put out as a last-ditch effort on Stan's part, the book was not expected to explode. Superheroes were the old fad after all, people finding it increasingly difficult to connect to characters who fought threats that seemed all too real with powers they knew were all too fake. But the Fantastic Four changed everything. They told us a different story, and they further advanced the superhero myth. The first comic to release in what would soon be known worldwide as the Marvel Universe, Fantastic Four was simply different. These characters were humans. They were a bickering family who, on the surface, looked fairly normal. Except, of course, for Ben Grimm, the Thing, but more on that later. As the now iconic story goes, Reed Richards, scientist extraordinaire, in an attempt to beat the dirty Soviets in the space race, launched himself, his girlfriend Sue, her brother Johnny, and his best friend Ben on a stolen experimental spaceship into space. Of course, no one questions why Reed brought along his girlfriend or her kid brother, but that's not important. This does not go well, as can easily be predicted. After being bombarded with cosmic rays and sent hurtling down to Earth, the four realize that they have changed. They are now different. And it is clear from the foreset that they're going to live a very different lives. Here's where we add the next step to the tapestry of superheroes. These heroes were just like us. They started out as just normal humans who had the same fear and the same motivations. The bomb scared them too. The threat of communists scared them too. So it is no wonder that Reed felt like he had to sneak onto a ship. If you thought that you had the talent and the knowledge to stop them, if you thought that you had the talent and the knowledge to end the space race, for America to win and the bomb to be defeated, wouldn't you also sneak onto that ship? The cover of Fantastic Four #1, which is drawn beautifully by the king himself, Jack Kirby, shows the four going up against a large, huge monster. But compared to Action Comics #1, our heroes are rendered fairly small, and to be honest, it would be hard to tell the difference between them and the other passerbys on the street. These were characters just like us, up against new threats that, in this ever-advancing post-atomic world, felt bigger than anything we could ever approach. Yet, crucially, they face the monster. They do not run. They stare right at it, and as they bicker and make rude comments like all families do, they defeat the monster and win. So why couldn't we? If these characters were just like us, superhero accident aside, then it stands to reason we could face any threat that came our way. The early Fantastic Four stories spawned planets and realities, but the threat was almost always the more human aspect of them. The Mole-Men, the threat from the first issue, is defeated in literally one page. These monsters were nothing to the Fantastic Four, which meant that we didn't have to fear them either. But there's more. The other monster at the time was the threat of the unknown, the fear of the other, of who could be lurking in your neighborhood, secretly collecting information for the other side. This was the time of the Red Scare, and everyone was a communist. But once again, our heroes, as they always do, face this fear head on. In only the second issue of Fantastic Four, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee introduced a race of aliens that would soon become commonplace in the growing Marvel tapestry, the Skrulls. These often antagonists and sometimes allies of our heroes have become a household name by now, appearing quite recently in the billion-dollar blockbuster movie Captain Marvel. In that movie, they appear as a dying race in constant war with the stronger, brutal Kree. But where they first started, in the pages of Fantastic Four #2, they were a symbol of something much different. Skrulls are a shapeshifter. That's basically their whole deal. They can turn into anyone and perfectly imitate them, gaining everything but their memories. This was the perfect enemy for the time because it so closely represented the real fears and anxieties we were having. Your neighbor might be a Russian, or in this case a Skrull. No one could ever tell the difference. This, at the time invented to be just a one-off enemy, so perfectly encapsulated the fears of so many at the time, and, as our heroes always do, the Fantastic Four swiftly defeated them. Within 2 issues, the Four had already confronted and beaten the fears and anxieties in everyone's mind. These were the heroes for the new age, and they further tell us why we have connected with our Caped Crusaders for so long. They adapt and change, modernize and reboot, but always remain a constant front for us to push our anxieties through, and watch them disappear with the flip of a page. When the monsters of reality are too hard for us to face, it is very easy to lose yourself in the pages of the comic books, and be comforted by the fact that even our greatest heroes get scared too. But if they are just like us, as the Marvel Universe tries so hard to tell us day after day, then it stands to reason that we can defeat these enemies as well. Before we get in our fantastic car and depart from this stop on our journey, there's one more fairly crucial thing we must discuss. As I mentioned before, Ben Grimm, Reed's best friend, was cursed with powers that cannot be hidden. He could never live a normal life if he wanted to, try as he does time and time again. I mention this because it represents to me another fold in the way we connect to heroes, which is that they are not perfect. Some, if not all, don't even want to be heroes, and most of the time are dragged into it because of some crazy event, and now feel responsible for the rest of their life. The Thing wants to live a normal life, but he can't. Everyone on the street, everyone he knows, can tell that he's different. So, this is another reason why we connect so strongly to our heroes, and it's because they are flawed individuals just like ourselves. Sure, they can face the monsters that we can't face, but they still have personal anxieties and troubles which plague all of us, and even they cannot conquer. If our heroes were just perfect vehicles for us to throw our fears into and watch them defeat, I don't think that these stories would have lasted as long and have had such a large impact. But it's the part of ourselves that we see in our heroes. For Ben, that part where we all wish we looked just slightly different, that truly makes us connect so strongly. The Fantastic Four would go on to be a huge success and spawn an entire universe full of the most iconic characters known today. The new era of hero had started, and there was now no stopping it. Heroes were here to stay. Everything dies. That's a dark statement, but it's true. Life implies death. There's an end to everything. It's something that we all know, and we all have to accept at some point. Those lines, everything dies, also happens to be how writer Jonathan Hickman opens the first issue of New Avengers, a series that would become the launching point for a 4-year saga which ends, as all things do, with death. But this series does not just end with one death. It ends with the death of everything. Our heroes lose, like, really badly. New Avengers starts with Reed Richards, who we previously established as the first of our New Age heroes, describing to a room full of the most powerful men in the Marvel Universe what he has noticed. The multiverse is dying, and our Earth is going to die with it. It's only a matter of time. And in the end, it does. Everything dies. Of course, the Earth is reborn after a 9-issue event called Secret Wars in which Doom becomes God, but that isn't totally relevant to our current topic. What's important to keep in mind is that our heroes lose, the world ends, and everything dies. They lose for many reasons. First and foremost being that there was never really a way they were going to win. That's not what this story is about. This story is about a select few men who have immense power, banding together and thinking they can save the world all by themselves without even telling the world there was something to save them from. It is, in essence, a comment on how our real world is run by those who have power, by those who think they can and should solve all our problems for us, by those who think they are smarter and better than us, even though, time and time again, throughout history, they end up failing. And we see now, in our modern reality, these people continue to fail us immensely. To compare the crisis in Secret Wars with the crisis we are facing in reality, the death of our Earth due to climate change, is also largely being handled by those in power. Scientists have been telling the world about climate change for decades now, but the politicians and people who run our world simply don't do anything about it. So, where does that leave us? If we're meant to establish that our heroes are the ones that always save us, that we look to for comfort and support when the world is dark, but this story tells us that they lose, that they're just like the people who are failing us in real life, why do we continue to connect to them? Why are heroes arguably more powerful than more popular than they have ever been, with the birth of the superhero blockbuster dominating all discussions online about movies or really anything? Well, to answer that question, we once again return to Superman, as all good conversations do, and talk about, it's right here, All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison and Frank Quietly. All-Star Superman is also a story about death. The death of Superman, the character who most people would think could never die. In an attempt to save the world, and he of course succeeds, Superman literally flies into the sun, causing his cells to be radiated to an immense degree, and he basically gets cancer. All-Star Superman tells the story of Superman's last year on Earth, and what he does when he knows he does not have that much time left. All-Star Superman is one of the best comics ever written, and it's crucial to us to understanding what it is that superheroes mean to us. Because within these pages, Grant Morrison and Frank Quietly pen a tale that is the definitive idea of what superheroes are. Because it acts as more than just a story about the last year of Superman, but a meta-analysis on what superheroes are and the culture that they have applied to our reality. In issue 10 of All-Star Superman, entitled Never Ending, Superman travels the world and each hour saves someone new. It seems that it's just sort of a story about Superman doing everything he can to save everyone, but the end is something different. In Superman's Fortress of Solitude, he has the power to create worlds because he's Superman, alright? He can do whatever he wants, basically. He creates a world in which there is no Superman. He tries to do a little experiment. He thinks, what's going to happen to this world when I'm dead? So he creates a test world to see what happens in a world where there is no Superman. This world is meant to represent our Earth, because in it, we see two comic creators in Cleveland drawing the first pages of Action Comics. And the moral is that even in a world without Superman, we still create Superman. Because we're always going to need someone to comfort us. We're always going to need to look at some higher force, some being that will save us. If you look across time and history, gods are one of the most common constants in all cultures. Religion has always been around. There's always been a belief that there is something better, there is something different, and right now, we're looking toward superheroes for that same purpose. The current age of superheroes continues to be relevant. Even though they might start facing problems that even we have yet to encounter, and they might lose, as we see in Secret Wars, they still represent a symbol of hope and inspiration that all can connect to. Back in October, writer Tom Taylor and John Timms had John Kent, Superman's son, and the current Superman, because Superman's space, it's, again, not relevant, come out as bisexual in the pages of Superman Son of Kal-El, number 5. This one simple act resonated very strongly with many, many people, myself included, and I feel it's sort of an important thing to end on because it just shows how powerful these characters are. Having a symbol of who people are and how we can connect to them, which is stronger and better and inspirational, is important. Yes, the reality we're facing right now is dark. It seems like at every corner there's something new in the news that only ever seemed possible in comic books, and now it's happening in real life, and how can we ever hope to defeat it? But these stories still are important because finding hope will always be important. That's the true reason why we've always connected to these characters. It's because they give us hope. They give us happiness. And that's something that we all need. Superhero stories, for all their grand world building and silly characters, are, at their core, about powerful people winning, and winning for us. Now, I started this part out by saying everything dies. It's true, but it's dark. It happens to be how Jonathan Hickman starts his run on New Avengers, but something important to note is the way it ends. It ends with the lines, "Everything lives." After the rebirth of the New World, and Reed Richards is reunited with his family, he says that he used to think that everything dies, but now he sees everything lives. That is a hopeful part to end our story on. And to paraphrase great Grant Morrison, not to go back to them again, but all good conversations go back to them, Superman and his friends could get out of any insane problem that we throw at them. Issue after issue, he saves the day. We invented Superman, after all, so who's to say that we won't invent the next solution to the grand problems that we're facing?
Your doctor did really get held up again, Reagan. It's never as bad as it seems. You're much stronger than you think you are. Trust me. Thank you so much for watching this video. Keep believing and keep imagining.